Hey, it's Marcel. I got something cool to share with you. I just started this new campaign where I send you weekly text messages straight to your phone. All my best coaching tips, advice, and exclusive tools and strategies that I only share with my clients to make you a better leader. And the cool thing is you can also text me back. Tell me what you'd like to see more of, and you have access to me via text. So all of this for the price of a cheap cup of coffee, $4.95 per month. Hey, I'm even going to let you try it out for free for 14 days. So you got nothing to lose. If you want to subscribe, grab a pen and text me the word love, LOVE, to 424 377 7916.
Welcome to the Love in Action Podcast, the show that explores all the ways you can evolve into the best version of yourself as a leader. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love and care and inclusion, it will make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about love as a leadership and business strategy. Let's do this.
Hey, so I got a great show for you guys today. We're going to actually have two guests, which is unusual for the show. Our first guest is Joe Davis. He is the author of The Generous Leader, and Davis is a managing director and senior partner at the Boston Consulting Group. That book and Joe's ideas and methodology is perfectly lined up with my own thought leadership and leadership practices. So stay tuned for that. Don't go anywhere. He's going to be coming on a little bit later in the show. But first, a few weeks ago, I'm scrolling through my LinkedIn feed and I bump into this video that captured my attention. In that video, Gianpiero Petriglieri, a global expert on leadership and learning in the workplace and a professor of organizational behavior at INSEAD, he challenges conventional wisdom by stating that leadership is not a position or a set of skills. It's a kind of love. So here's a clip from that video. Take a listen.
So maybe that's why everyone has their own definition of leadership and makes up their own model. Because it's subjective, it's an illusion. Leadership doesn't really exist. Oh, wait, some of you will say. There's other things in my life that have no clear definition or concrete physical properties, but I can feel them, and they move me. They might be intangible, but they're significant. Like what? Like, for example, love. Now, that's a good point. And if I asked you, how do you know that love exists? I am sure you won't come up with a model. You won't be thinking of a role or a list of skills that make someone lovable. No. You immediately picture a person, a partner, a child, a siblings, a friend you love. And you know that love exists because you love somebody and because somebody loves you. And how do you know that love is real? That it's not an illusion, that you're not fooling yourself or that they're not fooling you? It's not because of what they look like or even what they say, isn't it? It's because of what you do in each other's presence. It's because you care and you show it. How? They do things for you that you didn't expect or maybe even deserve, sometimes at a personal cost.
Well, as you can imagine, that got my attention. I mean, that's a prominent global professor who, by the way, is trained as a psychiatrist. He's an MD, and he's released this video that links leadership to love. So I knew I had to explore further what he meant and how he arrived at that conclusion. So I invited him to the show, and we will start today's episode with my conversation with Dr. Gianpiero Petriglieri. And Gianpiero now joins us all the way from France. Welcome to the Love in Action Podcast.
Great to be here.
So I want to get right to that video that I thought it was thought-provoking, and it's getting around, lots of views. And again, it's called Leadership is a Kind of Love. Start with what made you want to put out that video? What inspired you to do that?
Well, I found that there was a little interest for that idea, certainly in my classrooms with my students of, management students of all kinds, from MBA, senior executives and whatnot. And certainly the central idea in my keynotes, in my talks. And I really wanted to play with form. I'm an author, obviously, I write. And I thought this really lent itself to a slightly different medium. I wanted to say it and put my face on it rather than just to write it. It's hard to tell, I wish I had a more sophisticated story, but it looked like something that would make a nice little video and that people might enjoy encountering in that format. People that I couldn't meet or touch directly in a small or large room.
Yeah. Well, and you had me from the beginning. And speaking of the beginning, you start the video talking about the dominant model of leadership. Some of us may fit that dominant model. And I'm going to ask you to explain what that is, but the dominant model. So there's really nothing wrong with it. It's a popular style, right? It's, I think, how most businesses operate still today. Well, I don't know. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I think there's a lot wrong with it, personally. But I think that's why I call it the dominant model, because it's the model that most people come up with, and it makes a lot of sense intuitively. There's a reason why it's popular, but I wasn't using that term dominant just simply to say that it's popular. I was using the term dominant to say that it also actually describes dominance, and then it aestheticizes it as leadership. Because, and the reason why, one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of really take it on directly is I think that model really creates a paradox in what I'm going to call the leadership industrial complex. There's all kind of universe of people like you and I, people that think about leadership, write about leadership, teach leadership, but also people who try to select leaders and then develop their own leadership and then practice leadership in companies, in organization. And there's certainly one interesting phenomenon that I've been looking at for a long time now, which is we both keep producing a certain kind of idea of leadership, a certain image of leadership, and then we complain that the leadership we have isn't good. We pay a lot of attention to leadership, we spend a lot of money on leadership, and then we say, but our company's leadership pipeline is thin, the leadership we have out there is not so good. I mean, you would imagine that with us, for a leadership-obsessed society as we are, for companies that invest so much in leadership, everyone would be going around saying, wow, in my company, in my country, we have so much leadership and it's so good. And it's not the case. Right. And so what I've been trying to explain is, why is that? It's not that we don't pay attention to leadership or not invest in it. It might be the case that we're incompetent. Okay, we don't know what we're doing. It might be the case, and some people say this, that we're malevolent, that we do things that actually benefit a small group of people and everyone else gets screwed. But in my work, I reject those two ideas. And what I'm trying to suggest is we're neither incompetent nor malevolent. We're just caught within a model of leadership which really doesn't describe the sort of leadership we want to see in the world and that we ourselves would like to experience, all right? And the dominant model in a nutshell is like this, is someone who gets to a high place or to a central place, and in that place, they get a lot of attention. And then they use certain skills or certain virtues or certain story, whatnot, some attributes to get other people to do what they want. And so there's really two parts of the dominant model: attention and influence. And that's what leadership, I mean, if you look at all the models, you can really boil them down to this. And any kind of leadership article, here's the story of some great CEO or some, activist that came out of nowhere. And this is how they got attention from followers. And these are the things they did to get other people to do what they thought needed to be done. And now all that is positively, I'm not saying attention and influence don't matter in leadership, but if that's where we stop, we are essentially aestheticizing narcissism. We're saying a leader is someone who gets somewhere and gets other people to do what they want. That for me is a kind of definition of a narcissist. Now,
Right.
I don't think people mean it, but that's what the dominant model ends up producing.
Ah,
And it also creates a problem that if that's what we think of as leadership, then I don't think we think enough about your aim as a leader and who benefits from it. Because we're saying as long as you can get attention and you can get stuff done through others, then you're a leader. But does it not matter whether you're trying to kind of feed people who are starving or whether you are robbing a bank? Surely that matters. The fact that you organize a team and you can galvanize them and reach your goal doesn't mean that what you're trying to do and for whom doesn't matter, right? And so I think the dominant model is both kind of narrow and for me a little bit deceiving. And it really does describe dominance. At the end of the day, that's the definition of dominance. Getting attention, getting other people to do what you want. The fact that we have rebranded it as leadership normalizes it, aestheticizes it, popularizes it, but then it creates the kind of problems we complain about. And we're one of the few industries that can put out a product and then complain about the same product.
right.
And so I was really wanting to kind of take it on and saying we need something better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So make the I don't know if you're ready for the transition, right, to your discovery, but there's something I want to get out of the way first. You said something really intriguing. You said that scientifically speaking, this whole idea of leadership is a problem. Leadership doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
Explain that.
I mean, I was being playful with that. What I mean to say is that leadership is a very problematic construct, and you'll be familiar with this, right? There's an enormous body of work, both in the academic and in the popular press, and we all have different definitions of leadership, and everyone has their own model. And in fact, there's almost a market for coming up with adjective leadership, and having your own kind of proprietary model. Every company tries to have their own personal model. And scientifically speaking, when you have a phenomenon that's hard to define and can't really be operationalized simply, in fact, my attempt to kind of describe the dominant model is really to try to see what's in common of a lot of models of leadership. But scientifically speaking, when you have that kind of phenomenon, usually that means that phenomenon might not really exist in the real world. But of course, I was being provocative. What I was also trying to say is, and I follow that in the video, is that most people actually, when I say that, have an intuitive reaction. No, that's not the case, because it's not that it doesn't exist, it's just intangible.
Yeah.
And we know that there's a lot of phenomena that are hard to define, but actually are scientifically tractable. So for example, consciousness is one of these phenomena, right? 30 years ago, consciousness belonged to the philosophers, belonged to the artist. But of course, we know now it's possible to approach it scientifically. And the same is true for leadership. But you have to approach it the same way we approach consciousness, the same way we approach love, which is these constructs that have a very flexible meaning. And that many people actually intuitively believe in. And that many people believe in leadership more than they actually know leadership. that's interesting in itself to me. So I was trying to get at this idea that leadership might be intangible, that it might be a construct, right? And that's where the idea of love comes from. You actually, Marcel, you've never seen leadership. Admit it. You've never seen leadership. No, you have not. Have you seen it? No,
I've never seen it or held it in my hand.
No, you've never. No, you've seen leaders. Maybe you've been that. And what I mean to say when I say it doesn't exist as a joke is that in some way the concept is fine, is interesting for people like you and I, to theorize or research. But what matters in the real world, what matters in everyday life is the practice. And the practice is made by people in bodies. And so when I ask people, have you seen leadership? No one ever tells me, oh yeah, I have. In our company, we have a great model. People say, oh yeah, I had this boss once.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm trying to point out. I'm trying to kind of help people remember their experience. See, I'm a leadership professor, and I have a genuine belief about what my job entails. And my job entails spending my life talking to people who are already doing what I'm supposed to teach. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in my classroom, they wouldn't be in my keynote, they wouldn't be listening to this podcast. Most of the people who are listening to you and I right now are already leading. I have nothing to teach them. All we can do is to remind them of their experience of leadership. And in people's experience, they never approach leadership as a theoretical, conceptual, intangible thing. It's a very real thing. I met this person, and this person made me feel something and do something. Right? And this is where, this was... you say, ready for the transition. What's your little discovery is that when we move from the conceptual to the experiential, and so if we wanted to be fanciful and academic, you could say mine is a phenomenological approach to leadership. I'm interested not in what should we call leadership. I'm interested in what do people call leadership? What is it that makes our brain click and say, I trust you. What you're saying is true, or it's hard, but I'm going to do it. Because that phenomenon, that spark, that neural pattern of activation, whatever you want to call it, it's extremely consequential. Right? It can make people follow you, or it can make people ignore you. And in my experience, people don't click when they see someone that fits a model. They click when they see someone that makes them feel understood and motivated. And actually, people don't even use those words. Those are words that, those are fancy words. People say, I was touched. I was moved. And even in those metaphors, Marcel, think touch and move are physical metaphors. And I think as a level of the phenomenon, this is my discovery. When we move from the conceptual, from the theoretical, from this world of academia or business, which is so up here, we go to, have you experienced leadership in your life? Of course I have. My boss showed up and I felt confused or invisible or anxious, and I was so touched that he listened and he understood what I was worried about, and I just felt right. And then we were moved to do something. And this is, for me, what I always encounter when you move from tell me about leadership, oh well, this person with these skills, to tell me about your experience of leadership. People go like, oh yeah, I was touched, I was moved. And moved is such a beautiful word in English, right? Because it has two meanings, both emotionally and physically. And scientifically speaking, when we have to define something by our subjective experience in normal science, not in the social sciences, but in natural science, in the natural science, I mean normal, not in the fact that social science are not normal in the kind of positivist sense. In the natural sciences, when you have to say, I know something when you feel it, it's a problem. But in the social sciences, of course, where we understand that a lot of realities are brought to life through relationship, through interaction, then of course leadership exists. So when I say leadership doesn't exist, it's a provocation. I want people to say, no, it does exist. And then suddenly that intuition reminds them, no, I've never seen, like you've never seen, like, and then I ask people about love, right? Have you ever seen love? I don't know. Philosophers have written books about love, but most people don't think love exists because they've read some philosophical treatise about love, or because they've seen some research paper about oxytocin peaks and neurolimbic activation. Most people, when I say, does love exist? You know what your brain just did as I asked? It probably remembered a brother, a sister, a friend, a parent, partner, someone that loves you, and someone who loves you, and hopefully that you love them back. And that's how we know love exists. We love somebody. And I just think leadership is exactly the same way. And when we remember that, which is the only thing a leadership professor can do, they cannot teach you anything. They can just remind you. It's easy to get distracted and get very intellectual in all of this, in all of this bulimic leadership landscape in which you and I and probably your listeners live. But when you remember the simple aspect of leadership, I mean, many, many times, have all your bosses been leader? Oh my God, Gianpiero, no, there's many, or my boss, I've never called them a leader. But there was one. Yeah. She really was a leader. And what made her a leader? Oh, she paid attention and had a conversation with me. Understood my concern. Tried to help me realize my aspirations. And that simplicity of care, for me, is the core of leadership. And this is what I mean when I say that leadership is a kind of love. When we theorize leadership, it's a position, it's attention, it's influence. But when we experience leadership, it's a relationship.
Yeah.
And it's a particular kind of relationship, right? And so I guess, the point I'm trying to make here is that leadership is not inside people. It's between people. I choose to lead, you choose me to lead. And that relationship can be momentary, can last a long time, can be very passionate or very quiet. We can be very much into it and then regret that we did. And the one thing I want to say is that relationship isn't necessarily good. So to say that leadership is a kind of love is not to romanticize leadership.
Sure.
Because, many people have, but it gives us a tool to think about when is it good.
Yeah. Everything you said just informs my whole sphere of, the people I follow, how I model my own thought leadership and my speaking engagements. But you put it into such a simple framework, of how love is like leadership. That's easy to understand. And yet we're still stuck with the dominant model. So I want to end with this. Maybe call us to a shift, okay? Because you've been there, I've been there, where it's really hard to go from the mindset that you have been perhaps raised with or been influenced by, which is the dominant model where you have the power and the control and you tell people what to do. And it's like you said, and then systemically you groom more people into that mindset, the dominant model, and you promote people to have that. So it's hard to break the chains of that, the way that operates and the way that has held its influence over corporate society for so long, right? I mean, you can go back to the Industrial Revolution, right?
So, I think you can go back a lot. Mm-hmm. You can go a lot further back. And I think that model will always be there. The model of, dominance, paternalism, verticality, or whatever you want call it. But here's how I think about it. That model also describes a kind of love, but it's a kind of very self-centered love. It's a way of trying to get people to you so that you can get them to do what you want. Let's use the right word, control them. And a lot of people in relationships are like that. I mean, I can be like that sometimes with my friends, with my children, with my mother. And sometimes I have to remind myself, how could I be better? How could I be better in our relationship? And, when we think of relationships, we all have when I ask people, have you had a partner that you felt dissatisfied with? And I was like, yeah, of course I did. And what was that? They were, they liked me. Maybe they even loved me. They're just very controlling. I mean, it wasn't struggled with a friend, a parent, a partner. It was like they didn't really love you. They just loved you. You were kind of a prop in their shaky self-esteem. And have you had a good relationship? Oh yeah, this person made me feel free and empowered and all of that. And all of us are capable of being that anxious partner, friend, parent. And all of us are capable on our best moments to be that kind of more caring, more generous. And so I always say, for me, the shift is this. Look, probably you with your children, you think this is what I learned from my parents, and you revisit, is this the parent I want to be? It's not easy to be a different parent than your parents, but it's possible. And many of us do that work. And we actually hold ourselves accountable to try to hold on to the things that our parents did well and maybe not repeat some of the things that we felt were mistakes. As friends, we say, is this the friends who I want to be? And we hold ourselves accountable to be the best friend, the best parent we can be. And I think this view really allows us to do the same work as leaders. Yes, I might have been trained and socialized and hammered that, you got to get up in the world and get other people to follow you, but I don't have to be like that. And for me, the shift is very simple. I always say, look, change questions. For me, there are 3 questions that are dominant right now in leadership and leadership development. One is, how do I get attention? 2 is, how do I influence people? And 3rd is, how do I overcome resistance? And Marcel, that's seduction, not love. And seduction has its place in love, but seduction alone can be deceiving, can be controlling. For love, for good love, you can't just seduce yourself to surrender. And so what I say is, why don't you try to ask yourself a slightly different question? Who do you care about? What do you care about? Why? Just commit. And 2, how do you show it? How does your behavior demonstrate care? And then the 3rd question for me is really the shift. Because of course you say, no, but I'm trying to get other people to do what I want because I care about them. It's good for them. Is your care constricting or liberating? Because that's the whole shift. The dominant model can actually be used out of care, but it's a controlling kind of care. It's it. You are capable of a more generous kind of care. Think about it. As a parent, as a friend, as a partner, you probably aspire to be less anxious and more generous. Why shouldn't you do that as a leader? Simply because we've been taught, no, but as a leader, you got to keep things under, you got to hold on to the reins. Leadership is the only relationship where we believe being controlling is kind of good. In every other domain of life, we wrestle with ourselves. How can I let my children free? How can I be a good spouse? How can I be a good partner? How can I be a better friend? And we know that the way you can be better at all those things is being less controlling. Same as a leader. Same as a leader. And there's no contradiction, but I need to look after the business results. Look, in any other relationship in your life, the instrumental and the kind of existential are no contradiction. I want
to make sure I provide for my family, and like that, they don't, I want to make sure that my kids don't, spend the money that they are given well, and they learn to be financially disciplined, and have maybe do some little jobs so that they can actually learn the value of working. And I also want them to discover who they are. And I don't think they're contradictory thing, the fact that I want to make sure certain things happen and I want them to be free. Only in business we think these two things are contradictory. Only in business we fear that if we don't just focus on the goals, we try to liberate people. Or what if the goals don't get reached? Because we have been socialized in this idea that any little bit of humanism is a deviance. It ended deviance. Every relationship, you're trying to get something done, and you're also trying to, bring to life a certain spirit.
Yeah.
And leadership is just the same. Leadership in business is no different.
Yeah. I want to end with something practical, a little gift for our listeners. So if you've made the shift to leading with love and care, what's the best way to do it?
The best way to do it is friends. Surround yourselves with people that help you be the kind of person you want to be in the world. It's really, one of the things we know when we look at relationships, it's very difficult to relate in a way that you haven't experienced. Like, this is why it's so difficult for us to be different parents than our parents and all that. And so the most important thing you can do is look at people that are able, maybe who are better than you are relating, who are better than you are leading, who are more caring, who are more loving, and stick to them, hang out to them, tell them, and tell people, I aspire to be this. Don't just make it your secret aspiration. Don't make people guess. Say it and let people hold you accountable to that. Look, if you think in your business strategy, right? This is one of the things I find practically all the time. And I think the power of, with love, the power of declaring and having others hold you accountable is very important. If your business strategy, you normally wouldn't keep it secret. You wouldn't say, oh yeah, we got this strategy, I got these goals, but I'm not going to tell my team. I just want them to kind of guess. But when it comes to our relationship aspiration, we're very shy. I'd like to be a more caring leader, but I don't want to say it. I just want people to kind of discover it. Just declare it. I'm here. I sense that I could be more caring, and I'd like you to help me do it and hold me accountable to it. And one of the things and the other thing is, one of the things that, everyone is, I don't think we make the shift, okay? I think we go back and forth all the time, you, I, and everyone else. And the factor is anxiety. The more anxious we are, the more controlling we are, the less anxious we are, the more we can afford to be caring and generous. So discover, what is it that freaks you out? Be honest. Is it the state of the team? Is it the economic condition? Or is it really that you feel inadequate, that people wouldn't admire you anymore? The most common. You're afraid that people would think you're soft.
Right.
And this is kind of, I don't know if you saw it. I just put out this little video clip. Now, and I want to end with a little reminder. Have you ever cared for someone? Now, really cared for them for a long time? Maybe when they were vulnerable, when they were fragile. That was one of the hardest things you probably did in your life. So for me, the shift begins with challenging this misconception. I'm going to call it what I think it is. It's a prejudice. That, that this kind of technical financial skills, these are the hard skill, and all this other stuff, love and care, is soft. No, that's hard. And that's hard because it requires you holding on to anxiety rather than trying to control, to look after your anxiety. We all know one thing about love. The better you are at loving, the more vulnerable you are. The more you kind of give yourself to other people in the hope that they won't hurt you. But you know what's going to happen? One day you're going to get hurt. And that's why most of us are lousy lovers, because we're trying not to get hurt.
Yeah.
And so, for me, is really learn what is it that you worry about and what would it take for you to get less worried. And this is why friends are so important, because if you think in business, in work, especially, one of the things that we most worry about is losing face, being embarrassed, being shown that maybe we're not as good or as competent or as responsible as we hope to be. And I don't think that's and I think it's good that people worry about their reputation, their responsibility, being the person they committed to being. But sometimes we worry a bit too much, right? And this is what friends are needed, because your friends are the only people who tell you, come on, don't take yourself too seriously. They take you seriously, but they don't help. They help you take yourself less seriously.
Yeah.
And unless you're capable of doing that, I think the shift becomes really hard. So honestly, I don't know what works for you. Some people, I'm not a big meditator. Some people think meditation helps them be less anxious. Some people think exercise helps them be less anxious. Me, other people, friends. But whatever you do, whatever helps you be less anxious will probably gonna help. It's gonna make you become more caring.
Fascinating. All right, we're going to bring this home this way. Call us to a call to action. So what would our call to action be based on this conversation?
Your job as a leader is to free people up. Is to manage freedom and care, and freedom is the consequence of care. It's not to manage performance. Performance will take care of itself. You most likely have people, you're surrounded by people who are ambitious, talented, competent. If you just can take care enough of the space they're in, they'll probably do what they need to do. The performance will be taken care of. And, this is one of the things we know a lot from academic work. Leaders actually don't affect performance directly. They think they do. But they affect performance indirectly by the kind of culture they create. And so think of care as your primary job. And think about, do people feel free? And trust me, stuff will get done. Stuff will get done.
I have nothing to add. Let's just end that on that beautiful note. Make leading with love part of your job. It's the whole job. Into this. Yeah.
It's the whole job.
Yeah.
It's the whole job.
Yeah.
And sometimes love means doing hard things. Taking hard choices and being challenging, saying the truth.
Yeah.
This is not enough. Or, we need more of this, less of that. That was hurtful. That was inappropriate, and all that.
Yeah.
All right.
So, hey, probably lots of people will want to reach out to you. So how can they connect with you? Give us a website, places they can go.
Yeah, obviously connect on LinkedIn or www.gpetriglieri.com. What was that? www.gpetriglieri.com.
And if that was tough for you guys, don't worry. Just go to my website. On the show notes, I will put his website on there for you. Hey,
do that.
It's been such a blast. Thank you so much for doing this for us. I truly felt like I was actually in one of your lectures. So double blessing.
Thank you very much, Marcel. Well, blessing was mine to be here with you. And thank you for your interest and and your heart being into this. I could feel it.
I will be right back with author Joe Davis, who wrote the book, The Generous Leader, which really is aligned with this conversation. So hang tight, stay tuned. I'll be right back. Okay, I mentioned this at the start of the show, and I'm pretty geeked up about it. Okay, you can now receive all my best coaching tips, advice, strategies, daily micro challenges, the exclusive stuff, folks, that I only share with my clients. straight from my coaching toolbox. Okay. All of that can now come to your phone via text for the price of a cheap cup of coffee, $4.95 per month. That's it. And you'll get a 14-day trial to, test it out if it's for you or not. If you don't like it, no biggie. You just type stop and you won't hear from me again. It's that simple. And by the way, it's me that's going to be texting you on the other end. It's not going to be a robot. It's not AI generated messages. It's me on the other end, sending you weekly messages to help you become a better leader. So I'd love to engage you by text. If you want to subscribe, grab a pen and a piece of paper right now. I'm going to give you a number to jot down. Here it is. Text me the word love, LOVE, to 424-377-7916. Again, text me the word love to 424-377-7916. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I'm excited about my next guest. Joe Davis will be joining us shortly. Joe is a managing director and senior partner at the Boston Consulting Group. Hey, if you're not familiar with Boston Consulting Group, or BCG, they're a global consulting firm with 32,000 employees with offices in 50 countries. BCG has won numerous Best Places to Work award, and their culture is known for being inclusive and really on the cutting edge of DEI. So you've heard me say this before. I have brought over 200 guests by now to the show, and I can say there are probably about maybe 15 to 20 who've written books whose messages really line up well with the Love in Action message, and especially my work as well as a speaker and author and coach and advisor. Well, I'm adding Joe to that list. Joe Davis has written a book called The Generous Leader: 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain. And in that book, Joe argues that generosity, inclusion, and authenticity, all the things we love to talk about here on the show, are the most important traits for current and aspiring leaders to cultivate. So can't wait to break that down with Joe. Joe's career at BCG has spanned 40 plus years. Through it all, his passion for people and his desire to support their development has inspired teams all over the world to work harder and better than they thought possible, creating exceptional collaborative results for BCG and its clients. Joe is a graduate of Whitman College, and he earned his MBA from Harvard Business School. Joe is married to Sarah, his wife of more than 40 years, whom he also met at Whitman College. He has 4 children and 7 grandchildren. And Joe Davis now joins us. Joe, welcome to the Love in Action podcast.
Thank you, Marcel. Thank you. But thank you for that intro. First off, it's awesome to be one of 10 to 15 books tied to your message. Secondly, because my children tell me don't exaggerate, I've only been at BCG 37 years, but we can round to 40. Most importantly, I now have 8 grandchildren. I just have to tell you that.
That's fantastic. Yeah. All right, we have to tell the PR. We'll have to tell the PR firm to update their copy.
Yeah, right. He's just born anyway. Thank you very much. Great. It's fun. Great to be here.
Awesome. Likewise, Joe. All right, so we start with this. You ready?
Yep.
What's your story?
What's my story? Well, it's 60 plus years old and 30 plus years of work. I could go on for hours, which I won't do. I was thinking about that. I've been at BCG for a long time, a lot of different roles. One thing I will say is I have a reputation, or maybe it's just a reality, that I am a little bit more authentic and vulnerable and known to shed a tear or two. And I thought I'd just share real quickly a couple stories there, because I think, the people debate, is leadership innate or is it developed? I do believe that actions and events and moments happen throughout your life that shape you as, in life and also as a leader, and you don't know it at the time. And 2 quick stories. When I was married, 23 years old, I cried through my vows. 23-year-old guy. I was mortified. I was embarrassed. My wife was clear as a bell. But afterwards, it was amazing. People came up, so many people, oh, that was so wonderful. I felt the emotion. I felt the love in the room. Here I was embarrassed, and actually it touched people. Then sadly, 8 years or 7 years later, my mom died. And we were in the church, the three brothers going to, say some words. Guess what? I sobbed through the whole thing. This time, not a word came out. And there the priest said, well, Joe, tears are the fountains of love. And also, guess what? Afterwards, so many people came up. Wow, the emotion, I could feel the love. So those two events, one exciting but embarrassing, one, quite sad, I think were quite moving to me. And I didn't think about it at the time that if you show some emotion, it actually inspires and motivates others. It's not just embarrassing. So that's, I could go on other parts of my story, but I think that's an important part of what shaped my leadership.
Yeah, and that speaks to so many things that go wrong in the workplace, Joe, right? How we compartmentalize our emotions. We check our feelings at the door on Monday morning, put on our boss or manager hat, right?
Yeah.
And that lends to so much disconnect instead of connecting with people at work.
Yeah. No, and I think those, it's tougher. I'm not sure where we'll go in this whole conversation, but, work and life is blurred like that.
Mm-hmm.
Technology started it, COVID put it again. So now you can't check at the door because, neither of us are in an office. I can tell by the background.
Yeah. All right. Should we dive into your book?
Sure.
Start with, the 30,000 foot level. Why this book? Why now?
Well, 30,000, 4 reasons. One, a lot of my friends and colleagues said you ought to write about leadership, especially after coming through COVID. And I engaged other executives to get different perspectives. 2, I had a bucket list when I was 14. I wrote, not a bucket list, I wrote a list of life goals. I lost that for 30 or 40 years. I found it not too long ago. And on there was get something published. So while that wasn't really in my mind, I guess it was there. 3, who may set up life post BCG, but more importantly, and I know a lot of people, as you do in your work, speak about bringing more heart and more generosity, more servant leadership to the workforce. But I thought, one more voice is never one too many. The more voices, and you touch people, I'll touch people. Brené Brown touches people. So that was the real motivation, is actually bring my voice to encouraging this type of leadership.
Yeah. You mentioned quite a few labels, including servant leadership, but your title is generous leader. How does a generous leader differ, maybe from a traditional leader or maybe from a servant leader? Give us an idea. What do you mean by generous leader?
Well, yeah, I define generous leader as someone who gives of themselves freely without expectation of direct personal benefit, so others that can develop, grow, and thrive at their full potential. It's probably similar to servant leader, but it's really about building your team up. Now, I want to say one thing very quickly, which is it does not mean you still don't have to get results. I was talking to Joaquin Duato, CEO of J&J, Johnson & Johnson. And he made a statement that was very powerful. He said, Joe, trying's good, best effort, that's all fine. But if you're a leader, outcomes matter. We all know that. He said, but the sooner you get past yourself and have the maturity to understand that you need to connect with and engage your people, the sooner you unlock the human traits that enables the best outcomes. So I thought that was pretty powerful. Of course, you got to get results. We all know that. Otherwise, you don't get to be a leader. But doing it through your teams is arguably, well, I think you believe it, and I believe it, is where the best results will come, when they're motivated, inspired.
100%. Okay, so your book has a framework. Lots of books have frameworks. My upcoming book will have a framework. I love frameworks because it kind of simplifies things and points people to, some actionable things. So walk us through the 7 ways we can be a generous leader.
Okay, and I'll do that quickly. Obviously, you can dive deep if you want. 1, I argue you need to connect personally and deeply with your teams. 2, and very importantly, be a generous listener, which is really around taking others' perspectives and listening to learn. 3, I use the word welcoming everyone, generous inclusion, which doesn't just mean in the diversity sense. It means bring people into your circle who are different levels from you, across different parts of the organization, etc. Be a generous ally. And, don't be just the button wearer, but actually be someone who helps create and pave the way for opportunities for others. Generally those who may have systemic disadvantages. Really generous development. We could go deep, but really about ensuring you're helping people grow. And then very importantly, because it's actually reasonably simple, small acts will have big impact. Congratulating somebody when they do something well, an email out, big deal. Saying happy birthday, a big deal. And then last, and I know it's kind of overused, we already touched on it, is, be real, be honest, or to use the regular words, be authentic and vulnerable. When you show some of your fears, you unlock others to move past the roadblocks they may have of their fears.
Yeah.
Those are the 7.
Yeah, what I like about a book like this, Joe, it's like you said earlier, there's nothing like earth-shattering as far as like, oh, this is a new methodology, but we have to keep banging on that drum and repeating these messages over and over and writing these books over and over for people to finally understand that to get to where they want to go, they might have to do the most counterintuitive thing in their nature, is to go against the grain of what the world has taught businesses and business schools of how you're supposed to lead. Because a lot of business schools don't even teach you leadership. They give you the management principles.
Management, right? Management.
So yeah, so I just love the fact that the way that you frame this book is so much driven by key soft skills behaviors. I don't even like to call it soft skills anymore because they're hard. They're hard skills.
Right. Actually, they're very difficult. You're right. Hard. They're soft, but extremely difficult if we think of that list.
Exactly. Tom Peters said soft is the new hard. I agree with him. So I want to start with, absolutely. We do drill down here, don't we? And our listeners are expecting it. So I'm gonna pick out chapter 2 for us to drill down on. So you highlight a story that really stood out for me. Okay, generous communication is what that chapter is about, folks, and which Joe says is about connecting personally and deeply. And Joe, you show us an example of that in that chapter. So take us back to, we're going to flash back to a time and place that we don't want to go, okay? Because there's a lot of trauma involved in going back, okay? But we're gonna go back to the second week of this global pandemic when you woke up at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what, we have second week, and even though BCG at the time was 7,000 people, I mean, everyone could feel we were off. Something was off. Actually, to me, my spouse and one of my daughters, the pandemic was just shaking them. So you just knew it was out there. And I'm one of these that thinks about my teams all the time. It's just kind of weird, but my brain, and woke up 4:30 just thinking about, wow, how is everybody feeling? And decided to send them a short note, basically just saying, I feel you, or feel for you, and tried to capture some of what they might have been feeling at the time. But it was interesting writing that note because it took me 45 minutes to write it. And I can't remember how many words it is, 60 words or something, like 45 minutes. Now, one, I wanted to get the words right, so it mattered to them. But two, like, who am I at 4:30 in the morning to know how everybody else was feeling? First off, my life, I was 35 years of BCG, big house, a lot of kids. I mean, it wasn't like, I wasn't in a little teeny New York apartment or something. You pretend you know where they're coming from. They what the hell? Or you got your colleagues saying, well, why are you writing a note like that? Do we all have to write notes like that? Oh my gosh. I mean, there's just a lot of different things that go through one's mind when you're, trying to connect with people when actually you're a reasonably senior, white, quite frankly, privileged male, to be blunt.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I mean, Joe, you wrote that email with your heart. It was 100% heart. And I can't imagine having 7,000 employees under me in the middle of the pandemic. So folks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually read the email with Joe's permission. It's in the book. It's on page 18 that Joe sent to his team. And it's addressed to all staff. This was dated March 26, 2020. The timestamp is on it, 5:16 a.m. The subject heading is good morning. Okay, this is what Joe said. I woke up this morning thinking of each of you, whether you are living in a small city apartment with multiple roommates, by yourself, as a couple navigating new office space in the bedroom and living room, as a family tripping over children or dogs, or children and dogs, in all the combinations we can imagine. I admire you for your connections to one another, for your commitment to your friends and families. Even my voice is cracking here, Joe. For your contributions to BCG and now that we each try to do every day to make a difference. For your willingness to keep at it. I'm honored. You are my colleagues. I hope you each have a wonderful day, Joe. And then I don't know if this was a part of the email or not, but right below your name, it says, this is a personal note as I was awakening this morning.
Yeah, that I didn't want them to think my chief of staff wrote some note the night before and sent it. Well, you got me tearing up too, my friend, remembering, you're right. We didn't want to go back and remember that. It was a tense time.
Well, before I went out on my own and started my own practice and speaking, I did report to many bosses and managers. Never did I receive a message like that in the worst of times. Of course, I didn't experience a global pandemic, but yet the way that you just show that way of connecting personally and deeply, I'm so curious. Did you have any fears or hesitations before you hit send?
Yeah, well, so many things. Wow, is this guy weak? The leader's not supposed to be weak. Is this guy weak? And what does he mean? He wakes up carried about this. How could he be thinking about all of us, really? And what does he know about my situation? Those things were all going through my mind. The weak thing, though, they're not weak, but you're right, it's rather personal, and that's not typical. But COVID wasn't typical either. Let me just say, there were a number of leaders. Arne Sorensen, you watch that Marriott video he sent, as he was suffering from cancer.
Yeah.
There's a number who shared that kind of vulnerability. It's very powerful to their people. And I think, as I said at the start of it, what other leaders either think, who the hell, what's going on here? Do I now have to match this? Am I supposed, I didn't want to put pressure on anybody else. I will say one thing though, so I hit it at 516. I had answers at 517. It was stunning. And I was on the East Coast, so my West Coast team was not. It was awake. There were others awake for whatever reason, and we know the reasons, just stressing.
Yeah,
so yeah. It was a very powerful message on the willingness to connect with a little bit of vulnerability, how it could be positively received, not like, who the hell do you think you are? What are you doing? I didn't get a single comment like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, how was it? What was the general sentiment behind how people received that? What was the reaction?
Well, there's two. Wow, you understand what I'm going through. That was very common. I have two dogs I just tripped over. Oh, well, you missed my cat, So there's a little bit of the practical nature of it. But then there was a lot of okay, you just tapped into what I was feeling and allowed me to think it's okay to feel it. And even to express it back. It was all email at the time, but express it back in an email to me. And I think that was the more powerful sentiment. It was a little bit releasing or freeing for people to say, yeah, I'm scared, or I'm stuck, or it's miserable in this little apartment and whatever. And I just want to talk about it. I think that was something that was released. And in a professional manner, I got to say, it didn't turn into a psychologist fest, but it was,
of course,
it just freed people.
Joe, what other practical ways would you say we can start to connect more personally and deeply with our employees or other stakeholders?
Well, okay, practical. First off, I will say you got to recognize and understand that your people are humans. They are not cogs in the wheel. The day of neutron jacks slash the bottom of every company, or IBM, not to be white shirt, blue coat, even IBM, those days are over. People are not a cog in the wheel. So you've got to start with that. Then practically, I guess a couple things. I think, well, I got to be careful. I don't want to go on too long. I think a few things is try to connect with people in ways they're connecting, email, Slack, whatever. That's very practical. The other thing is to keep things short. There's study after study that we engage for 12 seconds or 26 seconds, millions of words coming at us all the time. So keeping it short. I'm a big believer in your message 3 times. The first time they think, what's going on here? The second time they're thinking about something else. The third time they hear you. Now it doesn't mean, but basically the key message. I mean, I'll tell you something that Joaquin Duato, this is for senior people, but you could use it anywhere. CEO of J&J, I mentioned him once. He has a thing called friend and group testing. If he wants to connect in a speech or a conversation or a town hall, he'll friend test and he'll ask somebody, and he did this with someone 3 months into the job. He said, what do people say I'm saying? And in that case, the guy said, well, that you want to cut cost. He said, well, I never said that. He said, yeah, you did. I said, no, I want to simplify because we have a very matrix place and I want to make the place more effective. He said, yeah, I know. That's what you said, cut cost. I thought, oh my gosh. So what was in his head wasn't in their head. He was not connected. And another thing he does, I thought was very powerful, is group testing, he calls it, where he'll bring, if he's going to give a big talk, he'll bring together some people and practice. And he'll say, okay, what did I say? And he might have said the word computer and they said the word laptop. So he'll change the words to their words. Or he'll say, please tell me if you were home tonight, what did Joaquin say today? Tell me play back to me what you'd say at home. And he'd discover, my gosh, I was thinking one thing. I didn't connect with where they're thinking, and he'd adjust. So that's kind of some things on connecting. I think the other, tell me if you want me to stop, but yeah, I just think I could go into the other thing, of course, you got to do is you got to ask questions, and you got to listen. And, and understand that people know something you don't know. And when you know it, you will get to a better place, which is more about how to listen. But
I love it. That's a great segue to chapter 3, which is about generous listening. So you raise such an important point about being curious and taking another person's perspective and understanding their situation, right? And learn by listening, which to me sounds a lot like empathy. And one way that you illustrated the importance of perspective taking is a conversation you had with one of your colleagues, Debbie Lovich. Tell us about that and what did you learn?
Yeah, well, Debbie was calling me to yell at me, not nicely, but like, Joe, this was during COVID, you don't understand. We have 22-year-olds here and 25-year-olds and 30. We have so many different people, different backgrounds, different stages of their career and their life. And if you're making all these decisions during COVID as to, what kind of support we give, stipends, time off, whatever they might be, what we expect to work from home, you've got to connect better with where they are. You just have to. And that was, it was very good advice. Actually, in that email, I'd forgotten the order of things. So I actually did start having one-on-ones, just like with a 24-year-old, and they're just different people in different stages. I remember the first one I had was so interesting. The guy was on his bed. And I said, what are you doing on your bed? He said, well, I have a bedroom, a living room, and a kitchenette attached to the living room. That's my entire place. And my wife and I both work. One week she gets the couch or the coffee table and I'm on the bed. The next week we switch. Here I was in a 7-bedroom house where I'd raised all my children, switching bedrooms just to get a variety in life. So I was really out of touch with where that person was coming from. So that was very good counsel from her, which was very useful when you're sitting there making decisions in the complete unknown of COVID. Not everything that was a little unusual because no one knew where it was going. Usually you might have some vision. But if I didn't spend the time in our business, sorry, I'm going too much here. It's about the people. That's what BCG has, is people. If I wasn't connecting with the people, quote unquote, our asset, how could I even think about how to help?
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, I want to jump to chapter 5, and you bring allyship as one of the ways to be generous leader. So I consider myself an ally for gender equality and empowering more women to take leadership roles because we need more of them up the ranks. So you mentioned that the key to making diversity work is creating an atmosphere of allyship. So expand on that a little bit.
Yes. Okay. And I actually went all the way to this word called action ally, which I had not heard. Someone once called me, a young person, and said, you're such an action ally. So what do you mean? What am I doing? So it's important because there's 3, I already mentioned the button wear, Pride Month, you wear the button. Okay, that's fine. If you're not doing anything though, really, and then there's performative allies, which is a formal word I looked up and saw, which is I have metrics that I'm supposed to hit to get diversity on my team. So I hit the metrics. As my friends say, who, are in diversity. And so that's better than nothing, but that's not really what we want. And what you just said, what people tell me, an action ally actually is paving the way or opening the door, creating opportunities for somebody else to walk through and perform. And it's very interesting because they all said, do not do it for me. Don't just hand me a job. But open a door and then I can walk through and I deliver or I don't deliver. That's on me. That ain't on you. But two important points. Of course, whether it's an ally or a mentor, whichever role, you still want to give them your best coaching. That's what you want to do. And the other thing I think important, especially in allyship, and I had too many stories where when things got tough, the person was tripping up a bit, the ally / the mentor ran for the hills. And that is not, well, it's just not cool, period, but it's not an action ally. But it's, so that's it. I think, and, when you say allyship, that is because I think we're trying to make a difference for people who do have some systemic disadvantages. We can argue about that, and I know it's argued all over the country right now. Doesn't matter. I'm a believer they exist. But it's the same as being a mentor. I mean, a mentor, you want to open the doors for others to walk through. You want to coach them. And you want to be there when it's tough.
Interesting. There's so many different types of allies, right? So regardless of what angle you take or what avenue you walk on for allyship, how do we begin our journey as an ally? What are some action steps? You mentioned action ally, right? What are the action steps we can take to begin our journey?
Well, the first step is you have to connect with and find someone who, you might actually be able to help mentor and be an ally to. But importantly, you should ask them, do they want that support and help? This is something that I had to learn. Not everybody, oh yeah, I'm going to come in and save the day. I don't need a white knight. Intention, word and pun intended, saving the day. So you ask people, and ask also, I think, and sit down with people, how can I help? What are you looking for? How do I actually help make a difference here? Because you can't pretend to know their aspirations, where they're coming from, their background, etc., as we raised a minute ago. Those are some of the practical steps. And I think then importantly, with any type of mentorship, and something I don't think we all do as well, is check in. How's it going? Are you getting where you needed to get? Am I making the right kind of support? Am I there when you need me? No matter how good you are, I think all of us could do that better,
Joe, I want to tie this conversation. I want to tie this to the business case, right? So we have a lot of CEOs, a lot of C-suite listening. And of course, a lot of the soft skills arena, the people side of the business, as you and I both know, sometimes people are, is that important enough for us to develop the kind of culture that lends to, generous leadership? So make the case, the business case, for financial performance, maybe. I mean, what's the link between generous leadership and the bottom line?
Well, okay. I think the main case is if you actually, as a leader, are ensuring others thrive at their full potential, well, that means by definition, they're going to be performing extremely well. They're going to tend to follow you. They're going to be inspired. We didn't talk about inclusivity, but in the context of inviting others into the room, I bring in junior people into my room and say, oh my gosh, Joe, I had better context. I could think harder about how my job could perform in different ways. I actually want to go over and above. But I will think the case is actually, I don't know about you, when I was younger, I'd read annual reports. In the beginning, it was, CEO, all about my people, all about our people, and I used to think, baloney. The fact of the matter is, and actually when you say it's the C-suite understands it's all about the people, because a CEO can't do anything. They can allocate funds, and then they're external. I mean, they don't make the thing, whatever it is, or they don't talk to the customers. Well, they might in some cases. So really the whole role, and it is about ensuring others are performing. When others are performing, the data is just, it's endless. One, they stay longer. They don't attrit. Your best don't walk away from you. That you get more done. You get, if you're actually engaging with each other, you get more interesting insight. Now, if all of that doesn't lead to the bottom line, either you have the wrong product or it's a different point. But if your team is humming, you should be driving the bottom line. And that's really what this is about. I think that where it's trickier is your younger manager days, because the first time you're a manager, maybe your team's 3 people, and you think, okay, now I'm the boss, right? And I'm supposed to be the boss. And also, if they are screwing up, you think, okay, I can just get it done myself. And that works if you have a 3-person team. You just work extra hours. That doesn't work if you're Joaquin, as I said, 100,000 people at J&J. He cannot. It's impossible for him to do it by him. I mean, it's just without saying, it's a silly statement. So that's, that's my, I don't know. Do you have thoughts on, I know you're a believer in this philosophy too. Is there other, I guess.
Yeah, I usually, in my client discussions when they're vetting services, how is this going to impact the bond? I give them the worst case scenario. This is what happens if you don't invest in call it whatever you want, generous leadership, servant leadership, human leadership. And then I give them all the reasons, and that really makes people think when they see that by losing people in their workforce, it might be even more costly than investing in this kind of methodology that we're talking about to keep people engaged. Yeah.
I think that's one of the most practical things is whether you want to call it retention or attrition. It's very easy for the best to walk today, and really easy now with hybrid workforce, right? So if you are not inspiring them, they're going to walk. And I think we all know you need more of the best to really drive results.
Joe, you have gone through so much, in all of your years at BCG. I mean, you've gone through the 9/11, you went through the Great Depression of 2008, and most recently COVID. So I want to ask you, how has all this taught you personally about the value of leading with care, love, and compassion?
I think, actually, I think two things that taught me. First, I will say it. Yeah, you have to. Regardless of those, you still need to be decisive. You have to make, and in crisis, you probably have to even be more decisive. Now, you can be decisive in it. I don't know where we're going. I'm going to make these moves. If they're wrong, we'll change. That's very decisive. To sit there and say we're lost and not make moves in any of these crises, I think is not a good thing. That's the first point. Then the second point, though, is you have to be doing that. You don't have to. I mean, you got to be thinking about the business and your shareholders and the community, but also with your employees and your people in mind. Okay, what are the moves that I'm making that enable them to continue to perform at their best? Because they have to keep performing at their best. That's probably the biggest shift in my mind. Because you would always think about, oh, well, business may go down. What are we going to do? Okay, you go call on 6 more people. You do this, make work plans. But what I've learned through these crises is that your people are also, I mean, COVID was the extreme, but 9/11 was pretty bad too. I was in DC and it was like people running with their head cut off. Like, wow, we were close, or is it going to hit us? I mean, it just was insane, short term compared to COVID. But people need a leader there who's going to show the calm and the comfort and the decisiveness and the willingness to connect, just so they can be calm and perform. It's very easy for any of us to freeze in those moments.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so the journey of shifting your mindset or your business practices from more of the power model, the top-down model, to what we're talking about, the generous leadership model. Okay, it has a starting point, but it may be different whether you're, a middle manager, a CEO, or someone just coming out of college, starting your career. So how do I begin this journey?
Well, that's interesting, because I think time is the most important factor, but I think you've got to begin understanding it ain't all about you. You're not the solution to all the answers. You really have to do it with and through and leveraging your people. As Joaquin said, the sooner you unlock the human traits, the sooner you get to the best outcomes. Somehow just think that. It'll take you time to believe me, but think that's the first thing. So how do I help ensure that everybody else is growing and thriving? You do that. And the other thing is work gets pretty easy then, because everyone's doing their job well. Oh, now I've got all this time to think or to do, go see your child if you have a kid. I mean, don't do what you want. But that, I think, is the first thing you have to remember. Then I think, as far as traits, I actually think that most, and this, I won't go into it, Google did a study of the best managers, and it came down to the best were excellent coaches, and they asked and they listened. They asked and they listened. So I actually think if you just want to start on something, just ask questions of your people. And How do you see this? Where are you coming from? Why do you think it's that way?
Mhm.
They'll know something you don't know, and you'll get to a better place. That is an easy way to start. So one, you get better outcomes, and two, it shows massive respect. They say, oh, actually, you care about what I'm thinking. You better care. Don't just ask and throw it away. But then you got a lot of work to do. I think that's the one easy step to get going. The other one, we didn't talk about it, but this whole small acts, big impact. I had story after story from executives I spoke with, so when someone does a great job, send a congratulatory note, copy the team. Better yet, copy your boss. I mean, I had a mom tell me a story about, oh, my daughter got this note today from her boss, and she, the mom was gushing, the daughter was gushing, the enthusiasm and the energy that person was now going to put into that company and her boss was incredible. So even small acts like a congratulations, remember a birthday, those would be two things: ask questions and listen, and just make simple small acts. I'll tell you one more very simple one. A colleague of mine said she loves it if she says, hey, this weekend I've got a big soccer tournament for my son. Man, it's going to be a big deal for us. And if on Monday or Tuesday, the boss says, hey, how was that soccer tournament? I mean, they had to remember, but then it takes 4 seconds. And she said, oh, someone asked me like that, I'm just really more devoted. You remembered, you cared, you asked me. Very small act builds connection.
Yeah. All right. So before we wind down here and go to our closing, I want to give you the space to, if you have something to promote or maybe share something we did not cover that our listeners must know.
Well, that last question is almost the same. I just think the world has changed, and it's not just the Gen Zers are different, whether it be the technology and COVID and all this, the work life is blurred. That's a fact. People need to bring and want to bring their human self to work. So what you really need to know is that is a cog. That is not a cog in the wheel. That is not a podcast host or a BCG consultant. That is Marcel, and that is Joe. And we're people, and we care about something, and we want to do well in your role in this company with wherever we're, but you have to try to connect with me. You have to care about me. You don't have to be my dad or my mom, but you have to connect with me. So that's my advice. And this ain't just young people are different. The technology and everything has changed the game. And it's probably going to get worse, right? Now you won't even know if your boss is really your boss. Talking to you on the video could be an AI generated fake boss. So they really need to know that somehow to connect.
Yep. All right, we're bringing home with 2 questions as we do with every guest. Joe, I'm a leader and I want to adopt a loving approach to leadership. This is the practical side of our show, right? So sticking to the theme of love in action, love being, it's a verb, right? It requires action. How do we do it? How do we lead with more actionable love day in and day out?
Well, gosh, you've got me repeating myself. I mean, I think it starts with understanding your colleagues and your teammates are people, are humans. I mean, assume you love your family. I know maybe not everybody does, and you don't have to bring quite that level of love, but you've got to bring that level of connection and caring to your people at work. And then you pick the way to do it, whether it's asking questions and listening to them, whether it's including them in meetings that you might not normally include their level so they feel more inspired. Whether you really pick some people and be an ally and a mentor and coach them well, you pick your method. But I think that's the main thing, unless you're a single entrepreneur, and eventually you're gonna have to hire somebody. Those somebodies are people.
It's funny, so much of what we talk about, if not everything that we talked about, has to do with relationships. And so much of leadership is about fostering good relationships, but you can't do it at the expense of results. So I always tell my audience that to be an effective leader, you have to have relationships and results.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree with you. You don't have results, you don't have the job. Then you can be a nice person, but you're not going to actually lead, inspire people to great places.
Yeah. And relationships usually is the avenue to results.
I think so. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think even someone asked me, well, how about these tech guys like Stephen Jobs? So he's gone. So yeah, he was a technical genius, but didn't he get fired multiple times because he couldn't connect? No, but then he had to be brought in for his technical genius, and then he got results for people, but maybe not in the most generous way.
Right.
But
right.
even there, a technical genius couldn't do it by himself.
Right. And even I think towards the latter stages before he died, he was a lot more people friendly than when he began his career early on. Okay, Joe, I want you to close us out with a key takeaway. Whatever you want, bring us home. What would be that one thing you'd like us to walk away with?
Okay, you know what? I'll say it this way. You will be inspired and feel better day by day, inside, in your family, in your life, if you actually make a real difference, be a generous leader to a handful of people in your organization and enable them to thrive at their full potential. You do that and you'll feel pretty damn good, and take it from someone on the other end. You'll leave a bit of a legacy that you'll feel good about.
There you go. There are multiple bonuses attached to that. All right, Joe, if I want to connect with you, find out more about you, where can I go?
Well, I think the best thing, I do have a website. It's always as good as a website is, joedavis.com. But LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. I now, since I've written this book, I'm more active and I do read the messages. If you really want to find me, send a message. I'll respond. Then we'll trade emails. I don't like to engage via LinkedIn, but we'll trade emails and I'll connect with people. It's been delightful and a blast hanging out with you. Appreciate you coming. Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, Marcel. Awesome. All right. You can keep the conversation going on social media with hashtag Love in Action Podcast. And also look for my show notes as well as a YouTube link to watch this very show. You can find all that on my website, marcelschwantes.com. And finally, if you're interested in sponsoring an episode of the show, I'd love to chat with you. Reach me on my website or find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.